What if I told you that the greatest prison on earth isn't made of concrete walls and iron bars, but of invisible chains forged from other people's opinions, society's expectations, and your own desperate need for approval? What if the reason you feel stuck, unfulfilled, and constantly anxious isn't because you lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because you've been living someone else's life instead of your own? What if everything you've been taught about success, happiness, and what it means to be a good person has been carefully designed to keep you small, obedient, and forever seeking validation from sources outside yourself? Picture this: a young man sitting in his study in Concord, Massachusetts, in the year 1837, watching the world around him with growing frustration and disillusionment. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a former minister who had walked away from the pulpit because he could no longer preach doctrines he didn't believe in, was about to write an essay that would shake the very foundations of American thought and culture. This wasn't going to be another dry philosophical treatise filled with abstract concepts and academic jargon. No, this was going to be a revolutionary manifesto, a call to arms for every individual who had ever felt the suffocating weight of conformity pressing down on their soul. Self-Reliance, the essay that emerged from Emerson's pen, would become one of the most influential pieces of writing in American history, a timeless guidebook for anyone seeking to break free from the mental slavery that society imposes on us from the moment we're born. But here's what makes this work so extraordinary, so profoundly relevant even today, nearly 200 years after it was written. Emerson wasn't just offering philosophical theories or abstract ideas. He was handing us the keys to unlock the prison we've built around ourselves, showing us exactly how to reclaim our power, trust our intuition, and live with the kind of authentic courage that most people only dream about. The core message of Self-Reliance is devastatingly simple yet radically challenging. Trust yourself. Trust your own thoughts, your own instincts, your own inner voice, even when, especially when, it contradicts everything the world is telling you. Emerson believed that every single person possesses a divine spark within them, a connection to universal truth and wisdom that is far more reliable than any external authority, whether that authority comes from religious institutions, academic experts, popular opinion, or even the people closest to you. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where Emerson's insights cut right to the heart of why so many of us feel lost and unfulfilled in modern life. He observed that most people never access this inner wisdom because they're too busy conforming to society's expectations, imitating others, and seeking approval from the crowd. From childhood, we're trained to look outside ourselves for answers, to defer to authority, to suppress our unique thoughts and feelings in favor of what's considered normal, acceptable, or proper. We're taught to value consistency over growth, conformity over authenticity, and the safety of the herd over the adventure of individual discovery. Emerson opens his essay with one of the most powerful statements ever written about human potential. To believe your own thought, he writes, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius. Read that again and let it sink in. The thoughts that whisper to you in moments of solitude, the ideas that excite you but seem too crazy to share, the dreams that feel uniquely yours, these aren't random mental noise to be dismissed or suppressed. They are the voice of truth speaking through you, and when you have the courage to express them, you tap into something universal and profound. Think about the greatest artists, inventors, leaders, and visionaries throughout history. What did they all have in common? They trusted their inner vision even when everyone around them said they were wrong, crazy, or doomed to fail. They valued their own perception of truth more than society's comfortable lies. They were willing to be misunderstood, criticized, and ridiculed rather than betray the authentic voice within them. This is what Emerson means by genius, not some rare intellectual gift possessed by a lucky few, but the courage to trust and express your own unique truth. But immediately, Emerson confronts the obstacle that stops most of us from accessing this genius within: envy. We look at others who have achieved success or expressed their unique gifts, and instead of recognizing that same potential within ourselves, we diminish ourselves through comparison. We convince ourselves that they possess something we lack, some special quality or advantage that makes their success possible but ours impossible. This is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the terrifying responsibility of trusting our own power. Envy is ignorance. Emerson declares with characteristic bluntness, imitation is suicide. When you spend your energy trying to be like someone else, copying their style, following their path, or measuring yourself against their achievements, you're not just wasting your potential, you're actively destroying it. You're killing the unique gift that only you can offer the world. You're committing a kind of spiritual suicide, murdering the authentic self to create a pale imitation of someone else. This is one of the most crucial insights in the entire essay, and it's something that our modern culture of social media comparison and influencer worship desperately needs to hear. Your job is not to become a second-rate version of someone you admire. Your job is to become the first and only version of yourself. There's a place in the universe that only you can fill, a contribution that only you can make, a song that only you can sing. When you abandon that responsibility to chase someone else's dream or follow someone else's formula for success, you rob the world of something irreplaceable. Emerson understood that this path of self-reliance requires tremendous courage because it means accepting complete responsibility for your life. Trust thyself, he commands. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. This isn't some gentle suggestion or optional lifestyle choice. This is a fundamental law of authentic living, as unbreakable as gravity. When you trust yourself, when you align with your own inner truth, you tap into a power and resilience that no external force can shake. But when you hand over that trust to others, seeking their approval, following their rules, living according to their expectations, you become weak, anxious, and perpetually dependent on forces beyond your control. Now, here's where Emerson's philosophy becomes really practical and revolutionary. He noticed something profound about children that most adults have forgotten. Watch a young child, he suggests, and you'll see self-reliance in its purest form. Children don't worry about being consistent with what they said yesterday. They don't spend hours agonizing over what others think of them. They don't feel obligated to maintain some carefully constructed image or defend positions they no longer believe in. They express exactly what they think and feel in each moment with complete authenticity and zero apology. The nonchalance of boys who are sure of a dinner, Emerson writes with obvious admiration, is something adults have tragically lost. Children possess a natural sovereignty, a healthy indifference to the opinions of others, because they haven't yet been corrupted by society's demand for conformity. They say what they think without filtering it through layers of social anxiety and self-censorship. They pursue what interests them without asking permission or seeking validation. They live in the present moment rather than being paralyzed by past mistakes or future consequences. But then something devastating happens. Society gets its hooks into us. Parents, teachers, religious leaders, and cultural institutions begin the process of domestication, training us to suppress our authentic impulses, doubt our own perceptions, and seek external validation for every thought and action. We learn to be ashamed of our unique qualities. We're taught that conformity equals safety and that standing out brings danger. We internalize the message that other people know better than we do what's right for our lives. By the time we reach adulthood, most of us have become what Emerson calls timid conformists, people who have traded their divine birthright of self-trust for the false security of belonging to the herd. We've learned to constantly monitor and adjust ourselves to fit in, to avoid criticism, to maintain approval. We've become masters of self-betrayal, automatically suppressing any thought or impulse that might set us apart from the crowd or challenge the status quo. This is why Emerson insists that we must accept the place the divine providence has found for you, the society of your contemporaries, the connection of events. This doesn't mean passive acceptance of whatever circumstances you find yourself in. It means recognizing that your unique position in life, with all its specific challenges, relationships, and opportunities, is exactly the right place for you to discover and express your authentic self. Your struggles aren't random obstacles to overcome on the way to someone else's definition of success. They're the precise curriculum designed to help you develop your unique gifts and fulfill your specific purpose. But accepting this truth requires letting go of one of society's most powerful tools of control, the demand for consistency. Emerson absolutely demolishes this false virtue with some of his most memorable and radical language. A foolish consistency, he declares, is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. This is one of the most frequently quoted lines from the essay, and with good reason. It strikes at the heart of why so many people feel trapped in lives that don't fit them anymore. Think about how much energy you waste trying to be consistent with positions you held in the past, with identities you've outgrown, with decisions you made when you knew far less than you know now. You stay in careers that drain your soul because you invested years getting the degree and don't want to waste that investment. You maintain relationships that have become toxic because you've always been with that person and change would seem like failure. You defend beliefs you no longer hold because admitting you were wrong feels like weakness. You present a carefully curated image to the world and then become a prisoner to maintaining that false self. This is exactly what Emerson is attacking. Why should you be afraid to contradict yourself, to change your mind, to grow beyond who you were yesterday? With consistency, a great soul has simply nothing to do, he writes. Your obligation is not to some rigid identity you constructed in the past. Your obligation is to truth, to growth, to the authentic unfolding of your consciousness in each new moment. Speak what you think today in words as hard as cannonballs, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks, even if it contradicts everything you said today. This doesn't mean being randomly inconsistent or lacking any principles. It means being loyal to your evolving understanding of truth rather than to a fixed image of yourself. It means having the courage to say, I was wrong, or, I've changed my mind, or, I used to believe that but I don't anymore. It means valuing growth over the false security of never admitting error or evolution. Emerson illustrates this point with powerful examples from history. He points to great figures like Pythagoras, Socrates, Jesus, Luther, Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton, people who changed the course of human civilization by having the courage to trust their own perceptions even when those perceptions contradicted the dominant beliefs of their time. These individuals weren't trying to be rebels or provocateurs. They simply valued truth more than approval, authentic understanding more than comfortable conformity. What society called their errors, or heresy, history now recognizes as breakthrough insights that elevated human understanding. But in their own time, these individuals paid a heavy price for their self-reliance. They faced ridicule, persecution, exile, and even death for refusing to conform to prevailing orthodoxies. Yet they persisted because they had what most people lack: the courage to trust their inner voice more than the outer chorus of social pressure. Now, Emerson doesn't romanticize this path or pretend it's easy. He's brutally honest about the costs of self-reliance. For nonconformity, the world whips you with its displeasure, he acknowledges. When you stop performing for others' approval, when you start trusting your own judgment over society's expectations, when you dare to be authentic rather than acceptable, you will face resistance. People will be disappointed in you. They'll question your judgment. They'll try to shame you back into conformity. They'll call you selfish, arrogant, irresponsible, or crazy. This is where most people give up on authentic living. The pain of social disapproval feels too intense, too threatening to our fundamental need for belonging and connection. So we retreat back into conformity, back into the comfortable prison of other people's expectations, convincing ourselves that this is wisdom, maturity, or just being realistic. We trade our freedom for the illusion of security, our authenticity for the hollow comfort of fitting in. But here's what Emerson understood with crystal clarity. This fear of other people's opinions is the primary force that keeps us small, stuck, and unfulfilled. As long as you need approval from others, as long as their displeasure has power over you, you remain enslaved to forces outside your control. You become a puppet dancing to strings pulled by society's constantly changing demands and expectations. You can never be free, never be fully yourself, never access your true power. So what's the solution? Emerson's answer is as simple as it is challenging. Stop caring what they think. Develop what he calls a sturdy lad mentality, someone who tries everything, judges for himself, and doesn't give a damn about society's verdicts. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant, cruel, or indifferent to others' legitimate needs. It means developing an internal locus of evaluation, trusting your own assessment of your actions and worth rather than outsourcing the judgment to the crowd. What I must do is all that concerns me, Emerson insists, not what the people think. This is revolutionary, almost shocking in its directness. Your job is not to please everyone, meet everyone's expectations, or gain universal approval. Your job is to discern what you must do, what your unique calling and conscience demand, and then do it regardless of whether others understand, approve, or celebrate it. This requires developing what might be called a sacred selfishness, a fierce protection of your own integrity and authentic path. Not the petty selfishness of taking from others or ignoring legitimate responsibilities, but the healthy selfishness of refusing to betray yourself to make others comfortable. The selfishness of valuing your own soul's growth over society's demand for conformity. Emerson goes even further, making a claim that many find controversial or even offensive. He suggests that our excessive concern for others, our compulsive charity and do-gooding, often comes from a place of weakness rather than strength. We throw ourselves into helping others, joining causes, and performing acts of charity partly to avoid the harder work of developing ourselves, trusting our own path, and living authentically. Do not tell me, he writes, of my obligation to put all poor men in good situations. Are they my poor? This sounds harsh, maybe even cruel, until you understand what he's really saying. He's not advocating indifference to suffering or abandoning legitimate compassion. He's attacking the performative charity that people engage in to earn social approval or avoid the uncomfortable work of self-development. Real goodness, real contribution to the world, doesn't come from following society's rules about what makes you a good person. It comes from being authentically yourself, developing your unique gifts, and offering them to the world from a place of genuine abundance rather than guilt or social pressure. I tell thee, thou foolish philanthropist, Emerson continues, that I grudge the dollar, the dime, the cent, I give to such men as do not belong to me and to whom I do not belong. This might be one of the most misunderstood passages in the essay, so let's be clear about what he means. Emerson is making a distinction between authentic relationship and obligation based on social pressure. When you genuinely care about someone, when they belong to you, in the sense that you have a real connection, helping them flows naturally from that relationship. It doesn't require rules, guilt, or social pressure. It's an authentic expression of care. But when you help someone because you're supposed to, because society says you should, because it makes you look good, or because you feel guilty if you don't, that help often does more harm than good. It keeps you from developing your own potential, and it often doesn't truly serve the person you're supposedly helping. It's charity as performance rather than genuine compassion. Emerson wants us to understand that the greatest gift you can give the world is not some forced act of charity but the full development and expression of your authentic self. If you can love me for what I am, he writes, we shall be happier. If you cannot, I will still seek to deserve that you should. This is the essence of healthy relationship, offering your authentic self without manipulation, performance, or the desperate need for approval, and allowing others to respond as they will. Now, one of the most powerful sections of the essay deals with what Emerson calls the iron string of self-trust. He uses this metallurgical metaphor to describe the unshakable strength that comes from alignment with your authentic self. When you trust yourself, when you act from genuine conviction rather than seeking approval, you tap into a power that makes you virtually immune to the manipulations and pressures that control most people. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself, Emerson declares with absolute finality. This is such a crucial truth that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. We desperately seek peace, happiness, and fulfillment from external sources. We think if we just find the right relationship, get the right job, achieve the right level of success, acquire the right possessions, or gain the right status, then we'll finally feel okay. But it never works. Every external achievement brings only temporary satisfaction before the hunger returns, demanding more. Why? Because you're looking for something outside yourself that can only be found within. Peace doesn't come from circumstances aligning with your preferences. It comes from self-trust, from knowing that regardless of what happens externally, you have the wisdom and strength to respond authentically and appropriately. It comes from no longer needing the world to be different than it is, no longer requiring validation from others, no longer basing your worth on achievements or acquisitions. This self-trust that Emerson advocates isn't based on your ability to control outcomes or guarantee success. It's based on something much deeper and more reliable: your connection to what he calls the universal mind, or the divine wisdom that flows through all things. When you quiet the noise of social conditioning and truly listen to your inner voice, you're not accessing some limited personal ego. You're tapping into something vast, timeless, and infinitely intelligent. This is why Emerson has such faith in intuition, in spontaneous thoughts, in the ideas that come to you in moments of quiet reflection. These aren't random mental events to be dismissed or analyzed away. They're the universe speaking through you, offering guidance that's far more reliable than any external authority. Your job is to trust this inner voice enough to act on it, even when you can't rationally justify or explain it to others. But here's the challenge: this inner voice is often quiet, subtle, easily drowned out by the noise of social pressure, fear, and habitual thinking. To access it, you need solitude. You need periods of withdrawal from the constant bombardment of other people's opinions, media messages, and social conditioning. You need time alone with yourself, space to think your own thoughts, feel your own feelings, and discover what you actually believe versus what you've been taught to believe. This is why Emerson places such emphasis on solitude and the practice of deliberate withdrawal from society. Not permanent isolation or antisocial behavior, but regular periods of disconnection that allow you to reconnect with yourself. In solitude, away from the pressure to perform, conform, or seek approval, you can hear the authentic voice of your soul. You can distinguish between what you genuinely think and feel versus what you've internalized from external conditioning. It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion, Emerson observes. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. This is the ultimate challenge and achievement of self-reliance. Not just thinking your own thoughts when you're alone, but maintaining that inner independence when you're surrounded by social pressure to conform. This requires developing what might be called a spiritual sovereignty, an inner authority that doesn't require external validation. Most people are like leaves blown by the wind of public opinion, constantly shifting positions based on what others think, what's trending, what seems popular or acceptable. They have no center, no core, no stable sense of self that remains constant regardless of external circumstances. The self-reliant person, in contrast, has cultivated such deep self-trust that they remain unmoved by the shifting winds of opinion. They know who they are, what they believe, and what they value, not because they've rigidly fixed these things in stone, but because they're constantly checking in with their own inner wisdom rather than outsourcing these fundamental questions to society. Emerson makes an important distinction here that's crucial to understand. Self-reliance doesn't mean isolation, rejecting all input from others, or pretending you don't need anyone. That would be a foolish and impossible independence. We're social creatures who learn from and depend on each other. The question isn't whether to engage with others but whether you engage from a place of authentic strength or desperate need for validation. When you trust yourself, you can receive input from others without being controlled by it. You can consider different perspectives without losing your center. You can appreciate others' wisdom without abandoning your own judgment. You can participate in society without being enslaved by its expectations. This is the paradox. True self-reliance actually makes you more capable of genuine relationship because you're bringing your authentic self rather than a desperate need for approval. Another crucial aspect of Emerson's philosophy involves his perspective on institutions, traditions, and the weight of the past. He notices that most people are imprisoned not just by contemporary social pressure but by reverence for traditions, established institutions, and historical precedents. We assume that because something has always been done a certain way, it must be the right way. We defer to ancient wisdom without questioning whether it still applies to our present circumstances. These are the voices which we hear in solitude, Emerson writes, but they grow faint and inaudible as we enter into the world. Why? Because institutions, whether religious, educational, governmental, or social, have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. They teach you to revere the past, follow established procedures, and distrust your own judgment. They convince you that wisdom belongs to the ancients, the experts, the authorities, anyone except yourself. But Emerson insists that every institution was once the lengthened shadow of one person, someone who had the courage to trust their unique vision and create something new. The religions, philosophical systems, and social structures we now treat as sacred and unchangeable were once radical innovations born from individual insight. What we now call tradition was once revolution. What we now defend as the only right way was once a daring experiment. So why should you treat your own insights as less valuable than those of people who lived centuries or millennia ago? Why should ancient wisdom automatically trump your present understanding? Why should you assume that the solutions that worked for previous generations are necessarily right for your current challenges? This doesn't mean disrespecting the past or ignoring valuable lessons from history. It means engaging with tradition as an equal, taking what serves your authentic growth and having the courage to leave the rest behind. An institution is the lengthened shadow of one man, Emerson reminds us. And that means you, right now, with your unique insights and vision, have the same potential to create, innovate, and contribute as any historical figure you've been taught to revere. The difference is just that they trusted themselves enough to act on their vision while you might still be waiting for permission, validation, or proof that you're good enough. This brings us to another powerful theme in the essay, Emerson's treatment of prayer and religion. Coming from a man who left the ministry because he couldn't preach doctrines he didn't believe, his perspective on religion is both respectful of its genuine purpose and critical of how it's typically practiced. He distinguishes between what he calls the prayer of the farmer kneeling in his field versus the prayer of the rogue and beggar. What's the difference? The farmer's prayer is a genuine expression of connection to something larger than himself, a humble acknowledgement of his dependence on forces beyond his control, a sincere request for guidance and strength. But the rogue's prayer is manipulation, an attempt to bargain with God, to get favors without doing the work, to bypass the laws of cause and effect through spiritual wheeling and dealing. Too often, Emerson argues, prayer becomes a form of begging, a way to avoid personal responsibility by asking divine intervention to give us what we haven't earned or protect us from the consequences of our actions. This isn't genuine spirituality, it's spiritual laziness. Real prayer, real connection to the divine, doesn't ask God to change external circumstances to suit our preferences. It asks for the wisdom, strength, and clarity to respond to whatever circumstances arise with authenticity and courage. This perspective on prayer reflects Emerson's larger philosophy about self-reliance and spirituality. He's not rejecting religion or divine connection. He's insisting that genuine spirituality empowers you to trust yourself more deeply, not to abandon that trust in favor of external authority. God, or the divine, or universal wisdom, or whatever term you prefer, speaks through your authentic self, not against it. Trusting yourself and trusting divine guidance aren't opposed. They're the same thing when you understand that the divine lives within you. This was radical theology in Emerson's time and remains challenging today. Most religious traditions teach you to distrust yourself, to see your natural impulses as sinful or corrupt, to rely on external scripture, institutional authority, or priestly interpretation rather than your own direct experience of the divine. Emerson completely rejects this framework. The divine speaks most clearly and directly through your own consciousness, your own intuition, your own authentic experience. That which shows God in me, he writes, fortifies me. That which shows God out of me, makes me a wart and a wen. This is such a profound distinction. Anything that connects you to your inner power, wisdom, and authenticity is genuinely spiritual, regardless of whether it comes through traditional religious channels. And anything that makes you feel small, dependent, and inadequate, even if it comes wrapped in religious language and rituals, is actually disconnecting you from the divine. Now let's talk about one of the most practical and immediately applicable aspects of Emerson's essay, his treatment of work, calling, and how to approach your vocation. In a section that feels remarkably relevant to modern career struggles, Emerson addresses the question of how to find meaningful work that aligns with your authentic self. His answer might surprise you. He doesn't say you need to find the perfect career or discover some grand life purpose before you can begin. Instead, he insists that you bring your authentic self to whatever work is in front of you right now. Do your work, and I shall know you, he declares. Your character, your authentic self, will be revealed and developed through how you approach your current responsibilities, not through endless searching for the ideal opportunity. This doesn't mean settling for work that violates your values or crushes your soul. It means recognizing that authentic living happens in the present moment with whatever circumstances you currently face. You don't need perfect conditions to begin living authentically. You begin where you are, with what you have, bringing your full presence and integrity to whatever task is in front of you. Too many people put their lives on hold, waiting for the right opportunity, the perfect circumstances, or clear confirmation that they're on the right path. Meanwhile, life passes by unlived. Emerson's message is clear: stop waiting and start living. Bring your authentic self to this moment, this task, this challenge. Trust that by doing so, you'll develop the wisdom and strength needed for whatever comes next. This connects to his broader point about the relationship between action and understanding. Most people think they need to fully understand something before they can act on it. They want guarantees, clear plans, and proof that they're making the right decision. But Emerson argues the opposite sequence: action creates understanding, not the other way around. Do the thing and you will have the power, he insists. You don't develop power, confidence, or capability by thinking about it, reading about it, or preparing for it. You develop it by doing, by acting from your authentic impulse even when you don't feel ready, even when you can't see the full path ahead. The power comes through the doing, not before it. This is why self-reliance requires courage more than confidence. Confidence says, I know I can do this. Courage says, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try anyway because it's what I must do. The self-reliant person acts from inner necessity rather than guaranteed outcomes. They trust that by following their authentic path, they'll develop whatever capabilities are needed along the way. Emerson also addresses one of the biggest obstacles to self-reliance: the fear of being misunderstood. Most people compromise their authentic expression because they desperately want to be understood, appreciated, and validated by others. They edit themselves, explain themselves, justify themselves, trying to manage how others perceive them. This is exhausting and ultimately futile. Is it so bad then to be misunderstood? Emerson asks. Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates, and Jesus, and Luther, and Copernicus, and Galileo, and Newton, and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood. This completely reframes the experience of being misunderstood. Instead of seeing it as a problem to avoid, Emerson presents it as an inevitable consequence of authentic living and possibly even a sign that you're on the right track. Think about this. If everyone understands and approves of you, it probably means you're not saying or doing anything particularly original or authentic. You're staying safely within the bounds of conventional thinking and accepted behavior. The moment you start trusting your own unique perceptions and expressing your authentic truth, some people won't get it. They'll misinterpret your motives, misunderstand your message, or reject your perspective entirely. This is okay. In fact, this is necessary. Your job is not to be understood by everyone. Your job is to be authentic. If your authentic expression finds resonance with even a few people who truly get it, that's far more valuable than the hollow approval of the masses who understand only your carefully edited performance of conformity. Emerson takes this idea even further with one of his most challenging claims. He suggests that we should be wary of being too consistent with our previous statements or positions because this consistency is usually maintained at the expense of growth and authentic evolution. Speak what you think now in hard words, he advises, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you said. Today, this is terrifying for most people because we've been taught that changing our minds is weakness, that contradicting ourselves is hypocrisy, that evolving our position means we were wrong before. But Emerson insists this is backwards. The real weakness is clinging to outdated positions because you're afraid of admitting growth. The real hypocrisy is performing consistency with beliefs you've outgrown because you care more about your image than truth. So you shall be sure to be misunderstood, Emerson acknowledges with almost gleeful satisfaction. Yes, be misunderstood. Let people think you're inconsistent. Allow them to be confused by your evolution. Their understanding of you is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to truth, to growth, to the authentic unfolding of your consciousness. This philosophy has profound implications for how we live in an age of social media where every statement is recorded, archived, and potentially used against you. The pressure to maintain consistency with your past statements, to defend positions you held years ago, to present an unchanging brand or image, is immense. But this pressure is exactly what keeps people locked in patterns that no longer serve them. Emerson would say, let it go. Trust yourself enough to grow, to change, to contradict your past self. The person you were 5 years ago, or even yesterday, was doing the best they could with the understanding they had at that time. Honor that, but don't let reverence for your past self prevent your present growth. You're under no obligation to be the same person you were when you didn't know what you know now. Now, in the final major section of the essay, Emerson addresses perhaps the ultimate question of self-reliance. What about society? What about our obligations to others? What about the valid concern that if everyone just does whatever they want, society will collapse into chaos? This is the question that makes many people reject self-reliance as selfish, dangerous, or naive. Emerson's answer is profound and counterintuitive. He argues that genuine self-reliance actually serves society far better than compulsive conformity. When people live authentically, trusting their own judgment and developing their unique gifts, they make contributions that conformists can never make. Innovation, creativity, genuine leadership, all of it comes from individuals who had the courage to trust themselves rather than just following the crowd. Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members, Emerson declares. This isn't paranoid thinking, it's accurate observation. Society, by its very nature, tends toward conformity, standardization, and the suppression of individual difference. Not because of some evil conspiracy but simply because institutions need predictability, and predictability requires that everyone behave in expected ways. But here's the paradox. While society demands conformity, it also desperately needs the innovations, insights, and contributions that only come from individuals who break from conformity. Every advance in human civilization, every breakthrough in understanding, every work of genuine art or authentic leadership, comes from someone who trusted themselves enough to see and express something new. So the most pro-social thing you can do isn't to conform, to be a good citizen in the sense of never questioning or challenging the status quo. The most pro-social thing you can do is to develop your authentic self, trust your unique perceptions, and offer your genuine gifts to the world. This serves the collective far more than another conformist going through the motions of socially approved behavior. Emerson makes this point with characteristic directness. Nothing is at last sacred but the integrity of your own mind. Let that sink in. Not religious dogma, not social conventions, not majority opinion, not expert consensus, not traditional wisdom. Nothing is more sacred than the integrity of your own mind. This doesn't mean your mind is infallible or that you're always right. It means that your direct experience and sincere judgment are the most reliable guides you have for navigating life. This is the foundation of genuine morality. Not following rules imposed from outside but acting from authentic integrity within. When you betray your own sense of what's right to follow social pressure, you've committed the primary sin. Not sin in some religious sense of violating divine commandments, but sin in the sense of disconnection from your authentic self and the divine wisdom that speaks through it. And here's what's so beautiful about this: when you trust yourself this deeply, when you act from genuine integrity rather than fear of social disapproval, you often end up acting in ways that genuinely serve others. Not because you're following rules about what makes you good, but because authentic connection to your deeper self naturally expresses itself as compassion, generosity, and genuine care. The person who helps others from authentic impulse rather than social pressure offers help that truly serves. The person who speaks truth because they must, not because it will make them popular, offers insights that genuinely illuminate. The person who creates from authentic vision rather than market demands produces work that actually moves and transforms people. This is why Emerson insists that self-reliance and genuine service to others aren't opposed but are actually the same thing when properly understood. You serve the world most effectively by being authentically yourself, not by trying to be what others need or expect. Your unique gifts, your specific insights, your particular way of seeing and being, these are what the world actually needs from you. But, and this is crucial, you can only offer these gifts if you trust yourself enough to develop and express them. Every moment you spend conforming to others' expectations, seeking approval, or performing what you think will make you acceptable is a moment you're not developing the unique contribution only you can make. It's not just a loss for you personally, though it certainly is that. It's a loss for everyone who might have benefited from your authentic gifts. Emerson also addresses the practical question of how to actually live this way in a world that constantly pressures you to conform. He doesn't offer a simple technique or step-by-step formula because that would contradict the entire philosophy. Self-reliance can't be reduced to a method or system because it's fundamentally about trusting your own judgment rather than following someone else's instructions, even his. But he does offer some guidance, some principles that can help you cultivate this capacity for self-trust. First, practice solitude regularly. Create space in your life away from the constant noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and demands. In this quiet, you can begin to distinguish your authentic voice from the internalized chorus of social conditioning. Second, act on your authentic impulses, especially the small ones. You don't need to make some dramatic gesture or life-changing decision to begin practicing self-reliance. Start with the thought you have in conversation that you normally suppress because it might be controversial. Share it. Start with the small desire you usually deny because it seems selfish or impractical. Honor it. These small acts of self-trust build the muscle of authenticity. Third, notice when you're performing for approval versus expressing your authentic self. This is subtle and requires honest self-observation. Are you sharing this opinion because you genuinely believe it or because saying it will make you look good? Are you pursuing this goal because it truly matters to you or because achieving it will impress others? Are you maintaining this relationship because you genuinely value the connection or because ending it would look bad? Get ruthlessly honest about your motivations. Fourth, be willing to be alone. Not permanently isolated, but comfortable with periods of aloneness, both physical solitude and the psychological aloneness of holding positions or making choices that others don't understand or support. Most people betray themselves to avoid this aloneness because it feels too threatening, too scary, too much like abandonment. But Emerson insists that until you can be genuinely okay alone, you can't be genuinely free in relationship. You'll always be compromising your authenticity to maintain connection. Fifth, and this is perhaps most important, trust your spontaneous thoughts and perceptions, especially the ones that surprise you or seem to come from nowhere. Emerson believed these spontaneous insights are the voice of universal wisdom speaking through your individual consciousness. When you have a sudden intuition, a flash of understanding, an unexpected idea, pay attention. Don't immediately dismiss it as random mental noise or analyze it away with your rational mind. This doesn't mean acting on every random impulse without discernment. It means giving your intuitive knowing the same respect and consideration you give to rational analysis or expert opinion. It means recognizing that your deepest wisdom often appears not as the result of careful logical thinking but as sudden knowing that seems to arrive fully formed. Emerson also warns against several common traps that prevent people from accessing genuine self-reliance. One major trap is what he calls the cultus of conformity, the worship of fitting in, being normal, and meeting society's standards. This isn't just about external pressure to conform. It's about the internal belief that conformity equals safety and that standing out brings danger. This belief is deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology. For most of human history, being excluded from the group meant death. Your survival literally depended on belonging, on maintaining approval, on not being cast out. So we've inherited nervous systems that treat social disapproval as an existential threat, triggering the same fear and stress responses as physical danger. But here's what's changed. In modern developed societies, social disapproval rarely threatens your actual survival. You can hold unpopular opinions, make unconventional choices, pursue unique paths, and still have access to food, shelter, and physical safety. The threat is psychological, not existential, but your nervous system doesn't know this. It still responds to social disapproval as if you're about to be cast out of the tribe to starve in the wilderness. Understanding this helps you navigate the fear that arises when you start trusting yourself more deeply. That anxiety you feel when you consider going against social expectations, that's not accurate information about real danger. It's an outdated alarm system responding to conditions that no longer exist. You can acknowledge the fear, thank your nervous system for trying to protect you, and then act courageously anyway. Another trap Emerson identifies is what might be called second-hand living, getting your sense of what's true, valuable, or worthwhile from external sources rather than your own experience. This shows up in countless ways. You read what experts say about how to live rather than discovering. Through your own experimentation, you adopt opinions from respected sources without testing them against your own observation. You pursue goals society deems valuable without asking whether they genuinely matter to you. The antidote to second-hand living is direct experience, first-hand engagement with life. Don't just read about things, try them. Don't just accept others' interpretations, form your own. Don't just follow the path everyone says is right. Experiment and discover what actually works for you. This doesn't mean rejecting all input from others or pretending you can learn everything from scratch. It means engaging with others' wisdom as suggestions to test rather than commandments to obey. Emerson also warns against the trap of nostalgia, the belief that wisdom, virtue, or greatness belong to the past and that the present is degraded by comparison. Every generation tends to think the previous one was better, wiser, more moral. This is partly true because we remember the best of the past while experiencing all the messiness of the present. But it's also a way of avoiding responsibility for creating greatness now. We denote this primary wisdom as intuition, Emerson writes, whilst all later teachings are tuitions. The deepest truths don't come from studying what others have written or mastering what tradition teaches. They come from direct intuitive knowing, the wisdom that arises spontaneously when you're genuinely present and open. Everything else, no matter how valuable, is secondary to this primary source. This has profound implications for how you approach learning and personal development. By all means, read widely, study different perspectives, learn from those who've gone before. But don't mistake this accumulated knowledge for wisdom. Wisdom comes from integrating what you learn with your own direct experience, testing ideas against reality, and trusting your own judgment about what's true and valuable. Now, one of the most powerful and practical sections of the essay addresses what Emerson calls traveling. But he's not really talking about physical travel. He's addressing the common belief that you need to go somewhere else, be someone else, have different circumstances before you can be happy, fulfilled, or truly yourself. Traveling is a fool's paradise, Emerson declares bluntly. Why? Because people travel, both literally and metaphorically, thinking that a change of scenery will solve problems that are actually internal. They move to a new city, start a new relationship, switch careers, or pursue some external change, hoping this will finally make them feel okay. But it doesn't work because they take themselves with them. I carry the same sad clown wherever I go, he writes, using himself as an example. The problems, insecurities, and dissatisfactions that plague you at home will plague you in Paris, New York, or Bali. The peace, confidence, and fulfillment you seek can't be found in any external location or circumstance. They can only be found through self-trust, through accepting and developing who you authentically are rather than endlessly seeking to become someone else somewhere else. This doesn't mean you should never travel or change circumstances. It means recognizing that external change without internal transformation is ultimately futile. First, develop self-trust. First, become comfortable with who you authentically are. First, create that inner foundation of peace and confidence. Then, if you want to travel, change careers, or transform your circumstances, you can do so from strength rather than desperate escape. This principle applies to so many modern struggles. People think if they just lose weight, they'll finally feel confident, but thin people can be just as insecure as heavy. People, if they haven't developed self-trust. People think if they just make more money, they'll finally feel secure, but wealthy people can be just as anxious as poor people if their security depends on external circumstances rather than inner strength. People think if they just find the right relationship, they'll finally feel complete, but no partner can fill the void left by self-betrayal. The solution, always and only, is self-reliance. Trust yourself, accept yourself, develop the capacity to be okay regardless of circumstances. Then everything else, health, wealth, relationships, becomes an enjoyable addition to an already complete life rather than a desperate search for something you lack. Emerson concludes the essay with some of his most soaring and inspirational language, painting a vision of what becomes possible when you truly embrace self-reliance. He talks about accessing a power that resides in the moment of transition from a past to a new state, that electric aliveness that comes when you're genuinely present rather than imprisoned by past conditioning or future anxiety. This is worth sitting with because it points to something most people rarely experience. Think about how you typically live. Much of your time is spent either replaying the past, analyzing what happened, dwelling on regrets or resentments, or projecting into the future, worrying about what might happen, planning how to control outcomes. Very little time is actually spent in present moment awareness, genuinely engaged with what's happening right now. But the present moment is where power lives. The past is fixed, unchangeable. The future is unknowable, uncontrollable. The only place you can actually act, choose, or create is right now. And when you bring your full authentic presence to this moment, without the weight of past conditioning or the anxiety of future consequences, you access a creativity, spontaneity, and power that's impossible when you're mentally elsewhere. This is what Emerson means by living in the moment of transition. You're not locked into who you were. You're not constrained by what you've always done. You're not limited by others' expectations or even your own past choices. In this moment, right now, you have the power to choose differently, to express yourself authentically, to trust your genuine impulse. Power ceases in the instant of repose, Emerson writes. It resides in the moment of transition. The moment you think you've got it all figured out, the moment you become comfortable with your current identity and stop growing, power leaves you. Power lives in the active process of becoming, the ongoing choice to trust yourself, the continuous evolution of authentic expression. This is why self-reliance isn't a destination you reach but a practice you engage in moment by moment. You never arrive at some final state of perfect self-trust where you never doubt yourself or face challenges to your authenticity. Instead, you develop increasing capacity to return to self-trust, to choose authenticity, to act from inner conviction even when it's difficult. Emerson also addresses what might be called the spiritual dimension of self-reliance. He repeatedly insists that trusting yourself isn't arrogance or disconnection from something larger than yourself. It's actually the most direct way to connect with the divine, with universal wisdom, with the creative intelligence that animates all existence. We lie in the lap of immense intelligence, he writes, which makes us receivers of its truth and organs of its activity. You're not separate from this intelligence, trying to figure everything out with your limited individual mind. You're an expression of this intelligence, a unique focal point through which universal wisdom seeks to know itself and act in the world. When you trust yourself deeply, you're trusting this intelligence flowing through you. When you suppress your authentic impulses out of fear or conformity, you're blocking the very wisdom that seeks to express itself through your unique consciousness. This is why self-trust and spiritual connection aren't opposed but are actually the same thing. Many religious and spiritual traditions teach the opposite, telling you to distrust yourself, to see your natural impulses as corrupted or sinful, to rely entirely on external authority or ancient scripture. Emerson directly challenges this. The divine speaks through your authentic nature, not against it. Anything that disconnects you from your own direct experience of truth is actually disconnecting you from the divine, regardless of how spiritual it appears. This was and remains a radical theology. It places ultimate authority in individual conscience and direct experience rather than institutional mediation. It suggests that you have as much access to divine wisdom as any priest, guru, or religious authority. It implies that your sincere authentic seeking is more spiritually valid than conforming to doctrines you don't genuinely understand or believe. As Emerson's essay moves toward its conclusion, he returns again and again to the central theme that has run through every section. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is more important than the integrity of your own mind and the courage to live according to your authentic truth. Not success, not approval, not security, not comfort, not avoiding criticism, not maintaining relationships, not meeting expectations, nothing. This sounds extreme until you realize what's at stake. When you betray yourself, when you suppress your authentic voice, when you conform to expectations that violate your integrity, you're not just missing out on happiness or fulfillment. You're committing what Emerson sees as the fundamental sin, disconnection from your own soul, from divine wisdom, from the unique purpose for which you exist. Insist on yourself, he commands, never imitate. This is both simple and profound. Your job is not to become like anyone else, no matter how admirable they are. Your job is to become more fully yourself, to develop and express the unique qualities that only you possess. The world doesn't need another imitation of someone great. It needs the original expression of you. This has powerful implications for how you approach role models, mentors, and influences. Learn from others, absolutely. Be inspired by those who've walked similar paths. Study the techniques and wisdom of those you admire. But always be filtering these influences through your own unique understanding and expression. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and trust yourself to know the difference. Emerson concludes with a vision of what human life could be if we actually embraced self-reliance, not as isolated individuals but as a society of authentic people trusting themselves and each other. He imagines a world where people no longer waste energy on conformity, pretense, and seeking approval. Where people develop and offer their unique gifts rather than imitating others. Where relationships are based on authentic connection rather than mutual performance. Where innovation and creativity flourish because people trust their unique perceptions. This isn't some impossible utopia. It's simply what becomes available when enough individuals have the courage to trust themselves. Every person who chooses authenticity over conformity makes it slightly easier for others to do the same. Every act of genuine self-expression gives others permission to trust themselves. Every time you refuse to betray yourself for approval, you strengthen the collective capacity for authenticity. And this, ultimately, is the deepest gift of self-reliance. Not just personal fulfillment, though you certainly gain that. Not just individual achievement, though that often follows. But the contribution you make to human collective evolution by demonstrating that it's possible to live authentically, to trust yourself, to express your unique truth even in a world that constantly pressures you to conform. So what does this all mean for you, right now, today, in your actual life with all its specific challenges, relationships, and circumstances? How do you actually practice self-reliance in a world that still demands conformity, in relationships that sometimes require compromise, in situations where trusting yourself might have real consequences? Start where you are. Don't wait for perfect conditions or complete clarity. Don't postpone authentic living until you feel ready or until circumstances improve. Start now, in this moment, with whatever small act of self-trust is available to you. Maybe it's speaking up with an unpopular opinion in a meeting. Maybe it's pursuing a creative project that excites you even though you can't justify its practical value. Maybe it's ending a relationship that's been dead for years but you've been too scared to leave. Maybe it's changing a position you've publicly defended but privately outgrown. Whatever it is, the practice is the same. Pause. Get quiet. Listen to what your deepest self actually knows, thinks, and wants. Then trust it enough to act on it, even if you can't rationally justify it, even if others won't understand, even if you feel scared. You'll make mistakes. Of course you will. Self-reliance doesn't guarantee you'll always make the right choice or that everything will work out perfectly. What it guarantees is that you'll be genuinely engaged with your own life rather than sleepwalking through someone else's version of what your life should be. You'll develop wisdom through direct experience rather than secondhand learning. You'll build authentic confidence through meeting challenges rather than avoiding them. And here's what's so beautiful. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Not because life gets easier or challenges disappear, but because your capacity for self-trust grows stronger. Each time you honor your authentic voice and survive the consequences, you build evidence that you can trust yourself. Each time you choose integrity over approval and discover you're still okay, you weaken the chains of social conditioning. Each time you express your unique truth and find genuine connection with others who resonate with it, you realize that conformity was never necessary for belonging. This is the path Emerson illuminates, not a comfortable path, not an easy path, but a path that leads to genuine freedom, authentic power, and deep fulfillment. It's a path that transforms not just your individual life but contributes to the collective evolution of human consciousness. It's a path that honors the divine gift of your unique existence rather than squandering it in service to others' expectations. The question facing you is simple. Will you trust yourself? Will you honor the authentic voice within you? Will you have the courage to be genuinely yourself in a world that constantly tempts you to be someone else? Will you insist on your own unique path even when everyone around you is following the crowd? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're intensely practical questions that you face every single day in countless small moments. Every time you suppress a thought because it might be controversial. Every time you perform an emotion you don't feel because it's expected. Every time you pursue a goal, because it will look good rather than because it genuinely matters to you. Every time you betray your own knowing to gain approval. These are the moments where you either practice self-reliance or surrender to conformity. And the cumulative effect of these small choices determines whether you live an authentic life or spend your days performing someone else's script. This is why Emerson's message remains so urgently relevant nearly 200 years after he wrote it. The specific circumstances have changed, the technology is different, but the fundamental human challenge remains the same. Will you trust yourself or will you hand over that trust to external authorities? Now, before we close, I want you to understand something crucial about implementing this philosophy. Self-reliance doesn't mean becoming harsh, rigid, or disconnected from others. It doesn't mean you never compromise, never consider others' perspectives, or never adapt to circumstances. True self-reliance actually makes you more flexible, more genuinely connected, more capable of healthy compromise. Why? Because when you trust yourself, you're not desperately defending some fragile ego or maintaining some carefully constructed image. You can hear criticism without being destroyed by it. You can consider different perspectives without losing your center. You can adapt and compromise when it genuinely serves without feeling like you're betraying yourself. You can change your mind without shame because you're loyal to truth rather than to a fixed identity. The person who lacks self-trust is actually much more rigid and defensive because everything feels like a threat. They can't admit error because their whole sense of self depends on being right. They can't compromise because any concession feels like defeat. They can't truly listen to others because they're too busy defending their position. Paradoxically, the conformist who seems so flexible and accommodating is actually imprisoned by their need for approval, while the self-reliant person has genuine freedom to respond authentically to each situation. This is why Emerson insists that self-reliance is the foundation for genuine relationship and authentic community. When you bring your authentic self to relationships rather than performing for approval, you create the possibility for real connection. When you trust yourself enough to express your genuine thoughts and feelings, you give others permission to do the same. When you no longer need others to be different than they are to make you feel okay, you can actually appreciate and enjoy them as they are. The deepest irony is that most people betray themselves because they're afraid of being alone, afraid of losing connection, afraid of not belonging. But this betrayal actually prevents genuine connection because you're bringing a false self to the relationship. The person others connect with isn't really you. It's the carefully edited performance you're presenting. So you end up feeling alone even when surrounded by people because nobody actually knows or loves the real you. Self-reliance breaks this cycle. You show up as yourself. Some people won't like it. That's okay. The ones who do genuinely appreciate you rather than your performance. These authentic connections, even if fewer, are infinitely more nourishing than 1,000 shallow relationships based on mutual pretense. And here's what Emerson understood so clearly. When you live this way, when you trust yourself and express your authentic truth, you naturally attract others who are seeking the same thing. Your authenticity gives them permission to trust themselves. Your courage inspires their courage. Your refusal to conform challenges their conformity. You become a living example that another way is possible. This is how transformation happens, not through preaching or convincing but through embodying. You can't argue people into self-reliance or shame them into trusting themselves. But you can live it yourself and trust that your example will resonate with those ready to hear the message. So as we come to the end of this deep exploration of Emerson's revolutionary essay, I want to leave you with a challenge. What would it look like to actually live this philosophy? Not perfectly, not all at once, but to genuinely begin practicing self-reliance in your actual life starting today. Maybe it means having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it means quitting the job that's crushing your soul. Maybe it means starting the creative project that excites you but seems impractical. Maybe it means ending the relationship you've outgrown. Maybe it means sharing the opinion you usually suppress. Maybe it means pursuing the dream you've labeled impossible. Maybe it means just sitting in silence long enough to hear what you actually think and feel beneath all the noise of social conditioning. Whatever it is for you, the practice is the same. Trust yourself. Listen to the authentic voice within. Act on it with courage. Accept the consequences, both the challenges and the unexpected gifts that come from authentic living. Learn from the experience, and then do it again, building the muscle of self-trust through repeated practice. This is the path Emerson illuminates, the path to genuine freedom, authentic power, and deep fulfillment. It's not easy. It requires tremendous courage. It will cost you relationships with people who prefer your conformist performance. It will bring criticism, misunderstanding, and periods of loneliness. But it will also bring you back to yourself, to the divine wisdom within you, to the unique purpose for which you exist. And ultimately, that's all that matters. Not success as society defines it. Not approval from the crowd. Not security, comfort, or the avoidance of criticism. But the integrity of your own mind, the authenticity of your expression, and the courage to trust yourself even when the whole world suggests you shouldn't. Emerson gives you permission. Actually, he insists you have an obligation to trust yourself, to follow your own path, to express your unique truth. This isn't selfishness or arrogance. It's honoring the divine gift of your existence. It's fulfilling the purpose for which you were created. It's offering the world the contribution that only you can make. The world doesn't need you to be someone else. It doesn't need another conformist following the prescribed path. It needs you, the authentic you, the real you, the you that emerges when you finally have the courage to trust yourself completely. That's what self-reliance offers, not just a philosophy to study but a way of living that transforms everything. So I'll leave you with Emerson's words ringing in your mind and heart. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. That string is waiting for you to pluck it, to let it resonate with your authentic frequency, to create the unique music that only you can bring into the world. Will you trust it? Will you play it? Will you have the courage to add your voice to the symphony of authentic human expression? The choice, as always, is yours. But know this, every moment you choose self-trust over conformity, every time you honor your authentic voice over the demands for approval, every instance when you choose integrity over comfort, you're not just transforming your own life. You're contributing to the collective awakening of human consciousness. You're making it easier for others to trust themselves. You're demonstrating that authentic living is possible even in a world designed to keep you conforming. And that, ultimately, is the deepest gift of Emerson's Self-Reliance, not just insight into human psychology or philosophical wisdom, but a practical roadmap for reclaiming your power, trusting your truth, and living with the kind of authentic courage that most people only dream about. The path is clear, the choice is yours, the time is now. Trust yourself and begin. If this deep dive into Emerson's timeless wisdom resonated with you, if you found yourself nodding along, feeling inspired, or recognizing yourself in these insights, then please take a moment to like this content and subscribe for more transformative explorations of philosophy, personal development, and the ideas that can genuinely change your life. Share this with someone who needs permission to trust themselves, someone who's struggling with conformity, someone who's ready to reclaim their authentic power. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who are searching for exactly this kind of deep, meaningful content that doesn't just entertain but genuinely transforms. Thank you for taking this journey through one of the most important essays ever written. And remember, the greatest adventure of your life is waiting on the other side of self-trust.